Here's a scenario. Picture a physical therapist instructing a client to walk without crutches after knee replacement surgery. Every instinct calls for you to step in, to steady their steps, to prevent the pain you can see in their eyes. But the therapist knows an important truth. Intervening doesn't help the client. It actually prevents recovery. The effort itself, no matter the pain involved, is the medicine. Hey there, it's me, Core, and you're listening to Exercising Self-Control, from Fitness to Flourishing. This same paradox, the necessity of pain and struggle, and how it's often best not to relieve it, plays out across human experience, from aging care facilities to corporate offices to our own living rooms. In these care facilities, for example, the best staff members practice what seems like benign neglect. They do as little as possible for residents, not out of laziness, but out of wisdom. The more they do for residents, the less residents can do for themselves over time. Independence atrophies through disuse, leaving people weaker than when they arrived. This will accelerate their physical and, perhaps, their mental decline. This observation crystallized something I've been wrestling with after hearing a meditation teacher discuss a practice aimed at taking away the suffering of the world, as she put it. While the intention is noble, I couldn't shake the feeling that this approach might be fundamentally misguided. As someone who has studied Stoicism, I've learned that suffering is largely optional. The suffering we experience is a matter of psychological skill rather than external circumstance. The ancient Stoics understood this distinction with remarkable clarity. Epictetus, who knew physical hardship intimately as a former slave, taught that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This isn't mere philosophical abstraction. The Stoics distinguished between pain, which is real, physical, and often unavoidable, and suffering, which is our psychological response to that pain. Pain demands attention. Suffering is optional. When we rush to eliminate others' discomfort, we rob them of the opportunity to develop this crucial distinction. Marcus Aurelius put it more directly. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Every obstacle becomes a chance to build the psychological muscle that transforms pain into growth rather than suffering. I saw this dynamic play out in my relationship with my dad, a man whose hands could craft beauty from wood or blank paper and a pencil. He also rebuilt precision from broken machinery. He was a very highly skilled craftsman. When I was young and interested in learning his skills, he faced a choice every parent knows: watch me struggle with my inept skills, or step in to help with a demonstration of how to do it well. Too often, he chose intervention. When I fumbled with a woodworking project, he'd take the tools from my hands and pretty much complete it himself. I was left with simple tasks that felt more like participation trophies than genuine accomplishment. His intentions were pure. He wanted to prevent my frustration and ensure I learned to create quality results. But the unintended consequence was that I never learned to push through the difficult middle phases where real skill develops. This pattern followed me into young adulthood. I learned to look for rescue when stymied in my attempts, to believe that struggle meant I was doing something wrong. It took years to unlearn this tendency and develop the tenacity to work through problems independently. Now, I recognize my dad's, in quotes, help as a form of inadvertent sabotage. kind in intention, weakening in effect. The challenge lies in distinguishing between empowering support and enabling dependency. Not all assistance is harmful, but we need clear criteria for when to help and when to step back. Choose to help when someone lacks basic resources or knowledge to begin, when the consequences of failure are disproportionately severe, when you're providing tools, not solutions, when the person explicitly requests specific guidance. Choose to step back when struggling is the primary path to growth, when your intervention prevents skill development, when the person can handle the consequences of failure, when you find yourself repeatedly solving the same problems for someone. Consider the difference between teaching someone to fish versus giving them fish. But go even further. Sometimes the most valuable learning happens when someone figures out how to make their own fishing rod from available materials, discovers their own fishing spots, and develops their own techniques through trial and error. That is how a master fisherman develops. This individual dynamic has scaled into a cultural phenomenon. We've created systems that reward helplessness. People search for increasingly minor traumas to explain their circumstances, scanning for microaggressions and sources of offense. The message becomes clear. Your problems exist outside yourself, and solutions must come from external sources. For example, other people, institutions, the government. This isn't to dismiss genuine trauma or injustice. Real harm requires real intervention. But when we expand the definition of trauma to include every uncomfortable experience, we create learned helplessness on a massive scale. People become professional victims, experts at identifying problems, but novices at solving them. The result is a generation that expects rescue rather than developing resilience. Like I did as a child. They've been taught that struggle indicates something is wrong, rather than understanding struggle is the natural process through which strength and skill develops. This realization transformed my career path. For a time, I set my sights on a career as a hypnotist, but I grew uncomfortable with the implied dynamic. Clients came expecting me to fix their problems while they remained passive recipients of change. Even when I explained that hypnosis requires active participation, the fundamental framework suggested that transformation happened to them rather than through them. Coaching offered a different model. Instead of being the solution provider, I became a guide who helps people discover their own solutions. Rather than giving answers, I ask better questions. Instead of removing obstacles, I help clients develop the tools to navigate them independently. The difference is important. Hypnosis clients, often in my experience, develop dependency and look for quick fixes. Coaching clients develop portable skills that serve them long after our work together ends. They want to learn. They learn to fish, then teach others to fish, creating expanding circles of competence rather than dependency. Again, this doesn't mean abandoning compassion or becoming callously indifferent to others' struggles. True compassion sometimes means allowing people to face their challenges rather than rescuing them from growth opportunities. Consider these examples of wise compassion. In parenting, instead of doing your child's homework, Sit nearby while they struggle, offering encouragement but not answers. The temporary discomfort of watching them wrestle with problems builds long-term capability. In management, rather than solving every problem employees bring you, ask, what do you think we should do? And what have you tried already? Guide them towards solutions they can discover themselves. In relationships, when friends face recurring problems, listen empathetically, but resist the urge to provide solutions. Ask questions that help them think through their options rather than telling them what to do. When people learn to solve their own problems, they become solution generators rather than problem collectors. They develop what psychologists call self-efficacy. This is the belief that they can influence the events affecting their lives. This confidence becomes contagious, inspiring others to take ownership of their circumstances. Marcus Aurelius understood this broadening effect. What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee. Individual strength contributes to societal resilience. When we help people become self-reliant, we strengthen not just individuals, but entire communities. The alternative, a culture of learned helplessness, creates a downward spiral. People who expect others to solve their problems raise children who expect the same. Institutions develop to meet this expectation, further reinforcing dependency. Society becomes fragile, lacking the distributed problem-solving capacity that comes from empowered individuals. The hardest part of this philosophy isn't intellectual, it's emotional. It requires the fortitude to watch people we care about face difficulties when we have the power to intervene. It means accepting short-term discomfort to enable long-term growth. But this is where the deepest compassion lies. In believing that people are capable of more than they currently demonstrate and giving them the space to prove themselves right. The goal isn't to eliminate suffering, but to transform it into strength. Not to remove all obstacles, but to build the capability to overcome those obstacles. Not to create a world without struggle, but to create people who can struggle with excellence. In a culture increasingly defined by fragility and finger-pointing, choosing self-reliance becomes a radical act. It's a declaration that we are the primary authors of our own experience, the chief architects of our own growth, and the ultimate source of our own strength. The physical therapist who lets the patient struggle isn't being cruel. They're being honest about what recovery requires. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is stay back and let people discover their own power to heal, to grow, and to transform, to use their pain to develop a strength they didn't know they had. That's it for today. Catch you next time.